A courtroom filled with silence, so dense you could practically hear the walls breathing. The judge angles forward, glasses gliding down just a little on the bridge of his nose, and pins Kody Brown in a glare that can slice steel. And then, like a hammer blow, he asks the one question no one thought Kody would ever be forced to respond to. Mr. Brown, where did the money go? Now, I want you to take that in for a second. Picture yourself in Kody's position. For decades, this man presented himself before cameras, relatives, even viewers at home, making a promise that never materialized. A promise of constructing not only one house, but four, for all of his wives and children. A promise of stability, a promise of security, a vow that one day Coyote Pass's vast property would be theirs to leave behind. But where houses once stood, dust now reigned. Where family harmony existed, cracks, and now instead of basking in the glory of TV fame as the self-assured leader, Kody was in a courtroom, his legacy tenuous. And the judge? He wasn't there to smile, nod, or allow Kody to spin his words. No, this was not that day. This was black and white. This was the day of reckoning. Come with me here, because what happened over the next couple of minutes left Kody cornered, embarrassed, and, for perhaps the first time in his life, utterly out of excuses. The courtroom wasn't all glamorous. No bright lights, no TLC cameras rolling, no dramatic cuts, just four walls, a small crowd of observers, the quiet rustle of papers, and the crushing reality bearing down. Kody sat alone, not with his wives on either side, not with Robyn shooting him empathetic looks, but by himself. And in that quietness, you could almost hear years' worth of questions going unpaid coming to come collect. For home viewers who have been along for the ride of Sister Wives since day one, this was the culmination of what they had all been waiting for. How many times did Kody speak of money as a problem that only he could figure out? How many family gatherings ended in tears because finances simply didn't work out? And how many times did he brush off the tough questions by saying that someday things would all add up? Well, someday had come, and it came dressed in a black robe. Mr. Brown, where did the money go? Those 7 words meant more than anything the Brown family had ever endured. Because this wasn't Meri questioning why her house wasn't constructed. This wasn't Christine asking where her future belonged in the scheme, and wasn't Janelle asking why she needed to withdraw from her own retirement account. This was the law insisting on an explanation, and for once, Kody couldn't deflect. He couldn't speak of vision and faith and the long game. The judge wasn't interested in dreams. He was interested in hard, tangible facts. At first, Kody attempted to rely on his customary charm. He began detailing how the money was allocated toward property and stretched thin due to large family expenses. But before he could spin too rapidly, the judge intervened. Mr. Brown, the judge said firmly, I'm not asking about dreams or ideas. I'm asking about numbers. Show me where the money is. And right there, Kody froze. To really get why this moment was so dramatic, let's go back a bit. Fans have been listening to Kody discuss Coyote Pass as if it were the jewel of his legacy for more than a decade. He described in rich detail 4 houses, one next to the other, where every wife would have finally achieved equality, where kids could play free from anxiety, where the family could be together in peace. But year after year, nothing, not a single brick was ever laid. Not a single house was ever framed. The land remained empty, sprouting weeds rather than memories. And yet the whole time the family continued to move. Las Vegas to Flagstaff, rentals to temporary houses, money slipping with each step. Christine quit. Meri became withdrawn. Janelle complained. And Robyn? Well, even she started noticing the cracks. So when the judge inquired as to where the money went, it wasn't just about dollars. It was about years of faith, loyalty, and sacrifice that amounted to nothing. It was about wives who invested their funds into a dream they never received. It was about children who watched stability get away. The quiet following the judge's question was deafening. You could practically hear Kody's mind frantically spinning. For a man accustomed to dictating the dialogue, this was new terrain. He fumbled through papers, coughed, attempted to summon that same swagger fans had witnessed for years. But at this moment, it was evident there was no speech powerful enough to conceal the truth. And you know what struck me most? The judge wasn't emotional. He wasn't furious. He wasn't screaming. He was cool, patient, and firm, which somehow made the entire episode hurt even more. Because when one loses their temper, one can argue back. But when someone coolly says, "Show me where the money went," and one is unable to respond, that's when the walls come crashing down. For the viewers at home, particularly those who've experienced their own fits of broken promises, ruined plans, and economic struggles, this moment landed like a gut check. Because it wasn't just about Kody, it was about accountability. It was about seeing someone, after years of evading responsibility, finally sing like a canary. And here's the surprise, this was only the start. The question from the judge was the match that ignited the flame. The deeper they dug, the more complicated the web grew, and the less satisfied the judge became with Kody's responses. But for the time being, at that moment, with the courtroom eyes upon him, and the silence bearing down, Kody Brown had nowhere to go. And believe me, you'll want to hear what transpired when the judge dug deeper, because what ensued left Kody embarrassed, but also exposed in a way the cameras on Sister Wives never did. Have you ever attempted to track a trail of money, only to discover it vanishing like sand underfoot? That's precisely what ensued when the court started investigating the Browns' finances. The judge laid out the paperwork on the bench, page after page of bank statements, transfers, and payments. To the naked eye, it was chaos. To the judge, it was like someone was gambling very recklessly with their family's future. And there, right in the center of it all, sat Kody Brown, the man who had once promised his wives security. The man who had assured his children they would eventually inherit a piece of land that would keep them bound together forever. The man who stood before the camera on Sister Wives and informed the world he had a plan. But in that courtroom, with the truth exposed in black and white figures, Kody's plan began to resemble less leadership and more mismanagement. Stick with me, because when the judge asked Kody to account for those figures, the excuses unraveled quicker than anyone could have anticipated. Here's what the forms indicated: multiple payments out, but never any regular ones coming in. Loans borrowed, but never paid off in full. Significant withdrawals that would just disappear. And account transfers that left more questions than answers. It was as if gazing at a knot that you couldn't unravel. Every time you believed you had located the loose end, the tangled mess grew only tighter. For years Kody had assured his wives that the money was going into the land, that once they developed on Coyote Pass, every penny would be worth it. But the land was still vacant, and the judge wanted to know why. "Mr. Brown," the judge said sternly, pointing at one line on the statement, "walk me through this. Where did this money go?" This was the time when Kody attempted to revert to his old ways. He cleared his throat, rustled his papers, and told the money was tied up in land and expenses. He started speaking of the expense of relocating from Las Vegas to Flagstaff, of providing for such a big family, of how things could become so complicated. But the issue was, Kody was accustomed to being the narrator. He was accustomed to wordsmithing his way out of family council or justifying himself to cameras. But in this courtroom, his words didn't mean the same thing. The judge wasn't a wife attempting to mediate peace. The judge wasn't a producer seeking good television. The judge demanded hard facts, and he wasn't going to let Kody drift into another rambling speech. "Mr. Brown," the judge cut in, his tone firm, "this is not a discussion about dreams or concepts. This is about figures. Where is the money?" That's when the tension hit its peak. And tension hit its peak. You could sense the air change. Even the people sitting in the gallery moved forward, their gazes flicking between the judge and Kody. For years fans had wondered that money issues lay at the center of the family's downfall, that beneath the smiles on TV there were overdue bills, tense bank accounts, and never-ending arguments about who paid what. And now, those rumors were being vindicated. Line by agonizing line. Kody hesitated. His responses dwindled. He repeated himself, going around in circles with the same explanations, hoping they would be believable if he used them enough. But the more he spoke, the more apparent it was. The math didn't add up. Judges don't have a business letting people get away with things. This one, in any case, was finicky. He returned to the documents, underlined another payment, and asked once more, "What about this transfer? Mr. Brown, where did this money end up?" Another hesitation. Another evasive response. "And this withdrawal, was it for the property? For your family? or something else? Kody was already visibly uncomfortable by this point. He fidgeted in his seat, his expression ratcheting up with each failed explanation. But all the excuses just made the whole worse. Because here's the thing, you can promise your wives things, you can do some magical storytelling for TV, but you can't spin accounting in a courtroom. It balances, or it doesn't. And for Kody, it didn't. For home viewers, particularly for those who had watched the Browns' finances crumble in front of them on television, this was a moment of vindication. Fans had wondered for years how the family could afford to own multiple houses, frequent moves, and a tract of land that never materialized. And now, it wasn't speculation anymore. It was evidence. Evidence that the trail of money didn't end in security or stability. Evidence that the sacrifices of the family had been squandered. Evidence that the vision of Coyote Pass had been a smoke and mirrors creation, not the real thing. And the judge's expression told it all, unimpressed, unsatisfied, unwilling to believe anything less than the truth. As Kody bumbled through his answers, the judge rocked back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and spoke words that brought the whole room to silence. Mr. Brown, your responses to date are not consistent with the evidence before me. One sentence cut more deeply than any hollered word ever could. It was a level, matter-of-fact remark, but it bore the sting of disappointment. And disappointment hurts harder than anger. Because when somebody's mad at you, you can fight back. But when somebody's matter-of-factly explaining to you that your words don't align with reality, that's when you realize the truth has finally caught up. The air was tense, the papers strewn about like pieces of a puzzle, and Kody cowered in the corner with no place to hide. And just when you thought it couldn't possibly get worse, the judge discovered something buried in those budget books that had the entire courtroom sitting forward in utter disbelief. Stick with me, because what the judge said next didn't just humiliate Kody, it shook the very core of the narrative he'd been presenting for years. Have you ever seen someone's whole dream come crashing down in front of them, piece by piece, word for word, leaving nothing but silence? That's exactly what it felt like the instant the judge scanned Kody Brown's books and then looked back up at him. The courtroom had been tense all morning, but this was different. This was not a question. This was not a debate. This was judgment. And it was not coming from a wife who could be won over with promises. It was not coming from fans at home who could only guess. This was coming from the one person Kody could not talk over, could not charm, and could not ignore: the judge. With a slow shake of the head, disappointment clear in his expression, the judge leaned forward and delivered words that would haunt Kody for a very long time. You've tied up your family's future in property that does nothing for them. No homes, no security, nothing. And in that instant, the air was sucked out of the room. All those years of dreams, hopes, and speeches regarding Coyote Pass, all reduced to rubble with a single sentence. Hold on to me, because what the judge went on to say cut even deeper, recalling to mind something money could never fix. Let's stop there for a moment. Consider what the judge was actually telling Kody. For years, Kody had promised Coyote Pass would be his forever land, a place where his wives would no longer feel left out, where the children could grow up together side by side, and where all of them could find stability. But the reality? Nothing was constructed. Not a single house, not a single foundation, not even a decent plan that proceeded. Millions of dollars went into dirt and weeds, land which appeared more like a ghost of forgotten commitments than a successful family neighborhood. The judge didn't have to yell to get the point across. He was disappointed louder than he was angry. His words in a calm tone created the most severe portrait. A father who wagered his family's future and had nothing but vacant acreage to show for it. While the judge spoke, everyone in the room looked at Kody. And here's the thing, his expression said it all before his words did. His characteristic confidence was missing. The chest-out stance, the persuasive grin, the impassioned speeches, all replaced with something unusual for Kody Brown: silence. Picture the pain of having a judge, before strangers and under oath, tell you that your leadership, your big dream, did not amount to anything. To one who always boasted about being in charge, that bite pierced more deeply than even his fights with his wives on national TV. Because this was not just personal judgment, it was official, it was on the record, and it was unarguable. The next thing out of the judge's lips hit harder than any gavel would. He didn't refer to it as bad planning. He didn't cushion it with courtesy language. He said what it was: neglect. That one word shifted the entire mood of the day. This wasn't about a dream that just didn't pan out. This wasn't about bad luck or poor timing. This was about responsibility, about trust, about a father and husband who had been entrusted with the loyalty, faith, and money of his family and blew it. Consider that for a second. Neglect. Not careless errors, not minor missteps. Neglect. And the courtroom fell silent once more, because everyone knew the gravity of that word. This is where the emotional blow happened. The judge reminded Kody that this wasn't about dollars and dirt. It was about people. He looked down at the paperwork, then back at Kody and said, "The choices you've made didn't just cost money. They cost your family stability. They cost your children the security of knowing where home really is." Those are words that cut deeper than any dollar amount could. For money can be replaced, but years of shattered promises, child years spent bouncing from home to home, never establishing roots, wives who invested trust and savings in a fantasy that never materialized, those cannot be remedied by a check. And in that instant, the courtroom wasn't seeing bank records any longer. They were seeing the human toll of failed leadership. For years, Kody had marketed himself as the visionary, the one with the master plan. He described visions of a day when everything would all finally come together. But with the judge's verdict, that dream came tumbling down like a house of cards. It wasn't only the wives that were disappointed. It wasn't only the children. It was the dream itself. Because Coyote Pass wasn't only meant to be land. It was meant to be confirmation that Kody's non-traditional family could make it. That against all odds they could build something enduring. And now the judge was establishing the dream never materialized, and the future had been risked. For home viewers, particularly those in their 50s and beyond, the moment was more than television drama. It was a reminder of something profound: responsibility. The notion that regardless of how grand your dreams are, unless you do something with the people who have faith in you, your dreams are nothing. The judge's response did matter, because it cut through decades of excuses and tales. It was the first time anyone had ever looked Kody straight in the face and said, "Enough, you failed to provide." And the thing is, sometimes disappointment resounds more loudly than fury, because fury dissipates, but disappointment persists. And that disappointment hung in the air in the courtroom. While sitting there, mute and stunned, the truth clouded like a storm over all Kody had created, or more accurately, never created. And yet, as stark as those words were, the actual heartache was when the judge urged Kody, "Stay with me," because in the blink of an eye, the courtroom shifted from money to family. And that's when the gravity of Kody's choices hit home even for him. Picture yourself sitting in a courtroom, not as an observer, but as an individual whose whole life was based on the man seated before the judge. Picture yourself discovering, in the moment, that the promises you had clung to for years, promises of houses, security, and stability, were never really made. This was exactly what the Brown wives experienced that day. This was no longer about money. This was about trust, about betrayal, about waking up and seeing that the man who had persuaded them to put their time, their love, and their savings into a dream had ended up leaving them with nothing but heartbreak. The judge wasn't merely gesturing to dollars missing from a piece of paper. He was gesturing directly to the cracks in this family, cracks that fans had watched develop gradually over the years, but that now, in the cold light of the courtroom, were impossible to disregard. Hang with me, because the manner in which every wife's tale unfolded within that courtroom wasn't merely heartbreaking. It was a reminder that shattered promises slice deeper than the loss of money. Let's begin with Meri, the original wife. The woman who was by Kody's side when the vision of plural marriage was still filled with promise and potential. For years she was promised her own house at Coyote Pass, a place that would at last provide her with autonomy, after years of feeling like a guest in her own union. But in the courtroom, that dream was revealed for what it actually was: nothing. The land that she had hoped to one day call home was simply sitting there growing weeds in place of houses. And the judge's words only twisted the blade further. No homes, no security, nothing. For Meri, it wasn't about a house. It was about years of devotion, years of waiting, years of hoping that at some point, she would count just like the others. And now that fantasy was crushed for good. Then there was Janelle. Of all the wives, she was the most financially astute. She worked hard, kept books in her own right, and struggled to keep her independence. She wanted Coyote Pass to prosper, not only for her but for her kids. She invested her own savings, thinking she was creating something tangible. But what did the court uncover? that her money also had been devoured by the dream, that even her diligent preparation had been sucked into the same black hole of someday. And this is the tragic part. Janelle's independence, something she worked so hard to keep safe, had been breached. In that courtroom, she had no choice but to confront the reality that the trust she had placed her faith in had cost her more than money. It had cost her the future she thought she was saving for herself, and her Christine's tale was not the same. She was the one who finally walked out, exhausted from living on promises that were never fulfilled. For years she asked where she was to fit into Kody's utopia. For years she held out for her turn. But ultimately Christine walked out because she learned the truth. There was no turn. The land, the homes, the promises, they were all mere smoke. And the courtroom confirmed it. As the judge set out the reality, Christine's decision to depart appeared less about rebellion and more about survival. She had opted for peace for herself and her children, rather than sitting around waiting for a dream that would never be constructed. And at that instant, many fans at home nodded, because they saw what Christine had seen all along, the writing on the wall. And then naturally, there was Robyn. For years it was believed by many that she was the favorite, the one protected by Kody above all others. She appeared to have the most stability, the most security, the most of Kody's attention. But even Robyn couldn't avoid the reality discovered in that courtroom. The land remained vacant, the money remained lost, and her security, not guaranteed either. For the first time, even Robyn had to confront the reality that Kody's dream wasn't as concrete as she believed, that even her position in the family, once thought of as secure, rested on unsteady ground. And the judge's disappointment clarified, no one was immune to the consequences. What made this section of the hearing so compelling wasn't the numbers, although that is significant, but the emotion behind them. The judge uttered something that resonated throughout the courtroom. This isn't only about money, this is about trust. And trust once broken is very hard to repair. Consider that decades of trust had been placed by these wives in Kody. They trusted in his leadership. They trusted in his plan. They trusted that their sacrifices would eventually be rewarded. And in that moment, the court exposed it, that trust was lost. The family who had appeared once as one with a shared vision turned out to be splintered by debts, secrets, and disappointments. And the bitterest part, not the loss of money. It was the betrayal of loyalty, the betrayal of love, the betrayal of years that could never be restored. For home viewers, particularly those who had been watching this family since the start, this was a gut check. The fans had witnessed the Browns bicker, cry, and cling together through the tempest. They'd watched as the Fishers crept in, but in their heart of hearts, many prayed that perhaps, just perhaps, the dream of Coyote Pass would strong enough to bring them together. But the courtroom was different. It wasn't just a failed dream, that it was proof that the rock this family was built on had been shattered for a long time, and seeing it upheld by a judge, in front of Kody himself, made it inescapable. So yes, the court revealed the missing funds, but more significantly, it revealed the truth that this wasn't merely a matter of money. It was about shattered trust. A family once held together by vows was now split by reality. But the court wasn't finished yet, because the ultimate ruling brought Kody consequences he had never anticipated. And what the judge decreed next was the moment that forever altered everything. Have you ever seen a moment where all the talking, all the excuses, all the somedays all come crashing down? It's the type of silence that gets your heart to beat just a little bit faster. That was the atmosphere inside the courtroom, the day the gavel fell on Kody Brown. For years, people had asked themselves how long the money saga could go on, how many times he could dodge, deflect, or charm his way out of being held accountable. But now, with the judge's words ringing through the courtroom, there was no more dodging. The question wasn't for tomorrow, it was for today. And the verdict? Well, just say it was the type of finale that left everyone, fans, family, even Kody himself, speechless. When the judge made the order, the atmosphere in the room changed. There was no shouting, no explosion, no impassioned defense by Kody. There was heavy silence instead. The words were straightforward but cutting. Mr. Brown, as of today, you have to report every account, every cent, every transfer. Open book. No exceptions. Consider that for a moment. For a man who had gone years keeping the family budget shrouded in secrecy, where money went, where money came from, who was actually paying for whom, this was a personal attack. His power to dictate what was said and unsaid, to deflect blame or alter the subject, was severed. Now, all would be documented. Black and white, no leeway for interpretation. And for Kody, whose talent had ever been in persuasion, convincing his wives to believe in such dreams as Coyote Pass, convincing the audience that one enormous family could work, this was worse than losing money or land. It was the loss of his reputation as provider, as planner, as the man in charge. But the judge didn't leave it there. Having scanned years of lost chances and misguided priorities, the judge stared Kody straight in the face and declared, "Responsibility is not what you want to do. It's what you've done. And here, you've done precious little." Those are words that floated in the air like a final judgment, not legally perhaps, but personally. The man who had structured his existence on presiding over a plural family, on keeping together multiple households, was being informed that the very ground he had established was sandy. And here's the best part. The courtroom wasn't packed with lawyers and clerks alone. Family members had been tracking every moment. Meri, Janelle, and Christine, all of whom had walked away in one fashion or another, now had vindication from the law itself. The years of frustration, the battles for money, the shattered dreams about houses, they weren't just psychological scars. They were actual real ones. Failures now exposed before a judge. But what makes this moment unforgettable is that it wasn't about the missing dollars. It was about the lost trust. The court opened up a truth that the wives had been repeating for years, something the fans had guessed about for years. And once she said it in that courtroom, there was no way to put the lid back on. For Robyn, the favorite wife, the moment was particularly chastening. She had believed it would work. She had remained loyal to Kody when the others departed. But now even she had to confront reality. Security she thought she enjoyed wasn't founded on rock. It was founded on quicksand. If the man she believed in leaving the future to couldn't even demonstrate how the money in the family came and went, what future was there to rely on? Christine, having loudly complained about broken promises for so long, surely must have felt a twinge of a bittersweet relief. After all those years of being told that she was panicking and not being for the vision, the court had basically validated her choice to walk away. She hadn't left a dream, she'd left a mirage. Meri and Janelle also had their vindication. The homes they were promised, the investments they believed were being made for them, were now dust and weeds at Coyote Pass. And now, the judge was making it plain. The man who had promised those things had not followed through. Outside the courtroom, news of the decision circulated fast. Viewers who had been following Sister Wives for more than a decade were left reeling. For years, Kody had been the patriarch of the Brown family, but now, that label rang hollow. His reputation wasn't just damaged, it was shattered. And this is where the actual emotional burden becomes. For the lawyers at home, particularly those who had invested in the vision of family, togetherness, and love conquering adversity, this was a hard pill to swallow. Because what the judge made certain was that love isn't sufficient when promises are not supported by action. Dreams do not construct houses. Words do not provide security. Only responsibility does. And the haunting question that lingers after the final gavel is this: if everything you've built is based on promises, what happens when the truth finally exposes the cracks? Kody emerged from that courtroom with more than just a court order. He left with the weight of a tarnished reputation. He had once been the big picture man, the man who talked 4 women into coming with him, talked millions of viewers into watching. But now, without excuses and charm, he departed with nothing but the after effects of years of misplaced priority. For the family, this was not simply a legal result. It was another break in a tale that had already been full of sorrows. Trust that was already fragile had now been established to be broken. And even for the final wife, Robyn, the truth was evident. The man she trusted as a leader couldn't even stand on his own word in court. For supporters, it was a moment of clarity. The court had accomplished what years of family gatherings, therapy sessions, and heart-to-heart talks had never been able to do. It brought the truth to light. And so as the courtroom cleared and Kody emerged into the world, one question lingered, not just for him, but for all of us who'd followed this case from the start. Can a dream founded on promises ever last when the truth finally emerges? Because at the end of the day, money can disappear, land can remain vacant, and families can fracture. But trust is the hard loss to recover from. And once it's lost, no court in the world can make it come back.